Hello there, Commonwealth from here, and let's get started to cover as much as possible, so be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press notification bell. Number 1. A new territory, a map that combines the best of 3D Zelda. We'll not talk about the size here, though to be honest, I prefer more density and even bigger lands when we compare to Tears of the Kingdom. I could see the following solution. Combining the sea and island navigation of the Wind Waker with your typical Zelda land experience. A division that we have waited over 40 years for since the first Zelda to truly get. And I'm not talking about a mainland and then 1, 2 or even 3 islands on a heavily cropped sea as was the case in the latest 2 Zelda games, but rather a big sea territory where we have to properly sail among 10 or more islands. This concept and map division in itself is something that I believe would work brilliantly for open-air Zelda, in particular if they have their own unique landscapes like in the Wind Waker. After all, flooding Hyrule has been done in the past. This time it is better to have both land and sea, and within it, landmasses. And since we're on the topic of islands, they shouldn't be uninhabited, but rather beam with life. Not so different from the mainland, which brings us to number 2, a return of urban Zelda. Let's face it, we all miss Castle Town in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But why? Since they have been teasing us with this place on a regular basis since the reveal of open-air Zelda in 2014. Then through flashbacks and memory cutscenes in 2017, and finally with the foundations of new buildings within the town walls in Tears of the Kingdom. Over 20 years after Twilight Princess, it is time for the Zelda team to finally bring a big solid settlement. Perhaps even 2 when we see how other open world games, like a number of Assassin's Creed games and the legendary The Witcher 3, to name 2 franchises, have enriched their open worlds with sprawling centers of commerce and power in the last decade. Zelda excels in the wilderness, but can do better in its town centers since the only true town with a square plus streets was Gerudo Town. And even though that was good, it can be done at a grander scale. And that goes both for the conceptualized mainland and at least 1 island in a greater sea. I'm not talking about a single city, but cities, plus towns that we'll fall in love with and then talk about for decades to come, like the different castle towns, Skyloft, and naturally Clocktown. And personally, I would like to see 1 twist between these. Number 3. Architecture from different time periods. What am I talking about? Since our world and its history is far more than half-timbered Central European medieval architecture, I mean the style of the Hylians. As simply put, I think Zelda could benefit from combining architectural styles from different time periods from around the world. Say, have a medieval/early Renaissance Venetian-style island city on the sea with an ancient Greek-Roman mainland city. You know, with stone and marble temples and buildings all filled with classic columns found within forums or agoras. You know, the ancient market squares. Then to add variety, which the Zelda team perfected on a smaller urban scale in 2017, blended with a town with Aztec/Mayan or Incan stone architecture in a different corner of the map. And no, Zone ruins don't count. And for 1 simple reason, there are no living, breathing individuals. Plus, a proper Japanese Edo-era town with streets instead of just a village, or a castle town, there's just so much potential by fusing or ultra-handing the best architectural styles from different time periods, and that being styles that the Zelda team already was playing with in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's ruins. But what we need are premises or tensions between the different races inhabiting them. The potential is immense, so let's leave the confines of the urban gates that were all around the Switch Zelda games. Number 4. Even more proper dungeons. Tears of the Kingdom brought back the temples of combat and puzzles which have been a staple of the franchise. At the same time, we can go even further in the direction of the peak dungeons of the 3 console generations. N64, GameCube, and the Wii. The golden era or Triforce of when Zelda was the dungeon video game experience. Since in Tears of the Kingdom, only the Lightning Temple could be considered a fully worthy traditional dungeon. Add to that, it wasn't even close to being the best desert dungeon in the series, despite being the best in Tears. It isn't even on the podium here, since Twilight Princess Arbiter's Grounds, Ocarina's Spirit Temple, yes, even Skyward Sword's Sandship feel more iconic and with better puzzles and mechanics. Quality is key, and I do sit with the feeling that the Zelda team aimed for 1 thing above all else with these 2023 dungeons. A compromise between dungeons and divine beasts. But what do you then end up with? is mid-range dungeons that barely reach into the top 10 Zelda temples of all time. What I miss is the ambition that the Zelda team used to have with their 3D Zelda games, the never-ending quest to outdo their former heights. Ocarina, Majora, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword. To the point that the Ancient Cistern in the 25th anniversary Zelda game is my favorite Zelda dungeon from start to finish of all time. In other words, I want to be able to update my top 10 Zelda dungeons list after the next open-air Zelda game. Also, we could have more than 5 main dungeons before the final one. I would easily take this, at the expense of slimming down the number of shrines to say 100 in the next game. Speaking of, number 5. Fewer but more good multi-stage side quests. After the main quest objectives and settlements tied to these, we have the side activities, and though I love the near endless amount of them, I wish they could be a little more balanced. Specifically, I want to see more brilliant multi-stage ones or side quests with truly remarkable awards instead of fetch quests galore. The latter is a symptom of too large open worlds, but it can be mitigated. Personally, I believe that Breath of the Wild did a better job with multi-stage questlines, in particular the main one regarding the restoration of the house, then followed by the construction of an entirely new settlement. In Tears, you simply didn't have the same wow factor for Breath of the Wild players, at least when it came to the multi-stage side quests, and the same goes with the rewards. Since we only restored or gave a helping hand, rather than building entire new settlements, aka shaping the world through the side quests. The solution here is simple. Fewer overall number of quests, but rather more of the addicting multi-stage ones with impact on the game itself. Number 6. A new race that is alive when we explore the world. The Zonai could have been the new Sheikah race, but the number of them we interact with in total is 2. The rest are the constructs. And though the Sheikah used to be limited to one individual beginning from Ocarina of Time, they were at least alive in the flesh and not just spirits when interacting with them. Ironically, even the one-time Yeti from Twilight Princess have more living NPCs that we could interact with in the flesh than the Zonai. Yes, we might have the 3 dragons, but do they speak? No. The next Zelda game could address this issue and introduce the first truly living and breathing civilization living in its own settlements since the Wind Waker. That is right, over 20 years have passed since a new race with explorable seats of power was debuted in a 3D Zelda game, and when we count handheld games, it isn't much better. Personally, I hope for a twist much like in Majora's Mask, where an enemy from the forest areas of Ocarina were turned into a swamp kingdom in Majora's Terminal. Since in truth, we're still waiting for a Zelda game that will redefine the franchise on the same level as Ocarina did with its races in 1998. A game that led us into Kokiri Forest, Kakariko Village of the Sheikah, Goron City, and Gerudo Fortress. We want back to that, and moving out of Hyrule allows for such a shakeup. Last but definitely not least, we have our number 7, a compelling linear story with a twist or two. The big S in Zelda games, which truth to be told has become smaller and smaller in importance in Skyward Sword. Yes, gameplay is key and should have priority, but the problem isn't really the story of these games, as when puzzled together, they can be great for the theories. It is just that they're only that after editing hours of footage. What I miss is a story that unfolds in front of us, and where immediate action is required following a well-crafted cutscene. Since, at the end of the day, the past is the past, but nothing can beat the present as we have seen in past 3D Zelda games. So should everything in the next Zelda game be linear? No, you want to restore the best of the past while preserving the best of present Zelda. For one, memories, if returning, should be linear to avoid potential crucial turning points showing up before the build-up to them, or rather be connected to dungeons. What do I have in mind? Simple. Have the story of the present or past for each region integrated with the main quest. Far greater impact and cutscenes that actually shock us, combining the dungeon resolution with a proper story cutscene and scenarios that make us eager to get to the next highlight, that is to say, dungeon. Perhaps also with the main villain making an entry after a moment of survival. You know, much like Ganondorf did, commenting on our feats against Phantom Ganon, Ocarina of Time, or this fellow in Twilight Princess. It all comes down to involvement and granting the player a feeling of shaping the story. We are the hero after all, and and should be there to experience the rise, fall, and rise again as Link. But even after going through all of this, we are only scratching the surface, and in future videos we'll go more in depth in these 7 and more points to ultimately give you a better, more balanced open-air Zelda experience. So be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell to not miss any uploads. Last but not least, a big thanks to you for watching and to all our patreon.com/commonrealm patrons for their massive support. Special shoutouts go to Raw producers Zach Johnson and JC Funk, and heroes Holly Wolf, Cheryl, and Garrett Hoy. You rock, and please enjoy one or both of these 2 awesome videos.